Yo, what's up guys? Today we're going to go over the very basics of making materials in Unreal Engine. Let's get right into it. Inside our content browser, let's create a material folder. Right click and create a new material. The naming convention I'll use is M underscore and then the name of the material. You probably want to stick to this naming convention as it's how Unreal looks for materials to be named. Double click to open the material editor. First thing you'll notice is our main output node. If you've worked with shading in any other 3D software, this will probably look familiar. On the left, we have our details panel, which will display information on the node we have selected. Tucked away all the way on the right side would be our palette, which will contain a list of all the nodes we can use. A number or a letter next to the node identifies a shortcut we can use by holding that down and then left clicking the canvas. Now usually this kind of thing can be intimidating, but I would approach learning to build materials or really anything that is node based the same way you would approach learning to understand Spanish or French or any other language other than your native one. All the nodes represent some kind of action that is just worded in an unfamiliar way, and it's really just about learning what each node translates to and stringing them together to communicate what you'd like the engine to do. If we look at our output node, we see basically a list of characteristics that describe the material we're making. We just simply have to provide the engine how much of each characteristic we'd like to include in our material, most of the time represented in decimal form on a scale of 0 to 1. If we hold 1 and then left click in the canvas, we'll get a 1 vector. And a vector is basically a number. If we drag this into roughness, we're telling Unreal we'd like 0 roughness. If we change it to 1, the material changes the intensity of roughness and it looks different. If we hold 2 and left click, we have a 2 vector, which is going to be used when you need to assign 2 vectors or something. We'll delete that, we won't be using it. Now let's hold 3 and left click and we have a 3 vector. This contains 3 vectors that represent red, green, and blue channels, or basically gives us the ability to assign a color. If we pick a color and drag it into the base color, we get that color. Now holding 4 and clicking will give us the same thing, but with an alpha channel as well. We'll delete that, we won't be using it. Now, for making a lot of materials, it's really as simple as that. It's just about experimenting to see how these characteristics change the look of your material, and assigning a value or a color to them to obtain that specific look. Base color, metallic, and roughness will get you most of the way there when you're crafting real-world materials. Now, sometimes we'll want to combine multiple values together. For instance, if we look at the emissive color characteristic, this will give us a material that emits light. But if we assign a value to it, we are stuck with the default white color. What if we wanted an emissive material that wasn't white? In that case, we'd want to multiply our color with the intensity of the emission. If we hold M and left click, we get a multiply node. We can take our base color and the intensity we want and multiply them to get our emissive material, and we can change the intensity accordingly. Now imagine a scene with tens or hundreds of different emissive materials. That's a lot of material creation for the same basic material. Plus, it'd be cumbersome to open the editor, search, and find the value we need to change, and then type in something different. It'd be more ideal if we could set up a base material and somehow just change values in the editor. This is where material instances come in handy. If we right-click, create new material instance, open it up, we have a new window we can quickly change parameters on any material without having to go all the way into the editor. They show up on the right side of this window, but we haven't told the engine what we'd like to control in this material instance. If we open up our main material again, we can right-click on the color and the 1 vector and click Convert to Parameter. We can then change what the parameter is called in the details panel, and if we save and go back to our instance, we can now change those values here. Now, what if we've downloaded a material from QuixelBridge or textures.com? We're basically just going to get a couple pictures or textures. If we jump back into our material editor and hold T and click, we get a texture sample node. With that selected, we can change the texture in the details panel. If we look at this material I downloaded from QuixelBridge, we can see that it comes with 3 textures. Let's take them out our content browser and just drag them into the editor. At the end of the file name, it will tell us what these are used for. Typically when you download materials online, you'll get something similar to this. The D stands for diffuse, otherwise known as albedo, or in our case just base color. The N stands for normal, which we can plug in here. And the last one, now this one's kind of confusing, but it actually stands for ambient occlusion, roughness, and displacement. And cleverly, that information is split up per channel so we can save on memory. The red goes to ambient occlusion, the blue goes to roughness, and the green goes to displacement, or in our case, world position. However, in Unreal Engine, we have to get a few more nodes if we want to have control over the displacement. A vertex node and a 1 vector to control how much displacement we want. And just like the emissive material, we want to multiply them and then run it into the world position. We can also right click on this 1 vector to convert it into a parameter for our material instance. We can actually turn these texture samples into parameters as well and change out textures at will in our instance. Lastly, when we are bringing in textures like this, we really need to be able to control the tiling of the texture. We can use the UV input on our textures for that, and the node we need is a texture coordinate node. But if we right click, we are unable to change this to a parameter for some reason. Our workaround for that is going to be very similar to what we've just done multiple times. We can multiply this node by a 1 vector and then call the parameter UV tiling to avoid having to come into the editor to change it. We can group and annotate nodes by selecting them and hitting C to stay organized. And that's about it. Appreciate you guys for watching. Hopefully learned a thing or two, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.